I'm Bob Baffert, and the road to the Kentucky Derby starts right now.
Today, the field is set, and our experts give you an inside track to the horses and stories behind them.
They want to win this race. They want to win it bad. It's the most important thing you can do as a horseman.
Also in this week's flashback, Hall of Fame jockey Pat Day knew his day would eventually come.
The press had sort of put a monkey on our back. Well, will you ever win the Derby? And I just kept saying, there's a Derby out there with my name on it.
And horse racing around the Baffert house is a family affair.
Our year kind of starts the first Saturday in May. It's important to him and it's important to us. So it's a pretty big deal around here.
Each year, more than 20,000 foals are born. For future champions, this is where the road begins.
Good magic to the front of the field in the bluegrass. Audible, no doubt about it. Justify winning the Santa Anita Derby.
At age 3, only 20 can enter the starting gates on the first Saturday of May.
All right for Justify.
This is the road to the Kentucky Derby, presented by Woodford Reserve.
The road to the Kentucky Derby is complete. We've made it to Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. Hi everyone, I'm Jordan Wetley and thanks for joining us. Back in September, trainers began preparing their horses in hopes of gaining a spot in the 145th Kentucky Derby. Now just getting to that point is impressive. Now it's about keeping those horses fit and healthy for the first Saturday in May. For a look at who's in, let's head to Donna Barton Brothers and our panel of experts.
Thanks, Jordan, and we're right underneath the historic Twin Spires. You can see the old-time wagering windows right behind us, and I am joined by our experts, Joe Christofek with Churchill Downs, twinspires.com racing analyst, and of course, horse trainer Norm Cassie. But before we talk to our experts about the contenders, let's take a look at the leaderboard. You can see right now sitting at the top of the leaderboard is Tacitus, right behind him, Omaha Beach, and right in the middle is that Bob Baffert horse, Improbable, number 11 on the list right now. And when you look at the second page though, one thing that really stands out is the bottom of the leaderboard. Historically, you've never needed more than 30 points to get in the Kentucky Derby, but this year, Joe, it looks like it's going to take a lot more than 30 points. Who do you think are the top 3 or 4 horses in there?
Wide open Derby, but it all starts with Bob Baffert. He's won 5 of these, one behind Ben Jones for the all-time lead. He's got 3 legitimate shots. He's got game winner, the 2-year-old champion, Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner, looking to become the 3rd horse to win both the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and the Kentucky Derby. He's never finished worse than 2nd. Then he's got Roadster, and in his pool of 2-year-olds last year, Bob thought this was the most talented one. Had a little bit of a setback. He won the Santa Anita Derby over game winner, and he right now has his arrow pointing straight up. Roadster's a legitimate contender. Then you have Improbable, and if you look at him, you think he's Justify. Chestnut, Big White Blaze, similar ownership group, but unlike Justify, he's lost. 2 in a row, in fact. The Rebel and the Arkansas Derby where he was 2nd, but he still has a little bit of upside as well.
And even though he looks like Justify, it's improbable he's going to win the Triple Crown again this year. Norm, let's talk about who's going to be right behind him. With your father, you led 5 of those 6 Kentucky Derby starters that Mark Cassie had in the Derby. You know what it takes to win this kind of a race. Who do you think are the main threats?
I think you start in the Arkansas Derby with Omaha Beach. I think if you had a prototype of a Derby horse, he would be it. He's got tactical speed. He'll have a perfect trip going into the first turn, which is so paramount. He's a horse that's seasoned. They just switched him over to the main track, and he's virtually unbeaten. He's, his arrow's pointing up. He's tough. I think he might end up going off as a favorite.
And he has Hall of Fame rider Mike Smith right now, but he also rides Roadster. Who else do you like?
I like Maximum Security. A lot of people are downplaying the Florida Derby this year, but this horse is another one that has tactical speed. He'll have a good trip going into the first turn, and his speed figure suggests that he's the fastest horse in the race, and he might actually be the horse to beat.
Well, those are the main contenders. When we come back, we'll take a look at some of the horses that are flying under the radar.
Thanks, guys. This is the statue of Aristides, the first horse to win the Kentucky Derby back in 1875. But he's not the only one immortalized here. You can also see one of the greatest jockeys of all time, Pat Day. Let's take a look at one of his legendary moments in this week's Kentucky Derby Flashback, brought to you by twinspires.com.
The 1992 Kentucky Derby had arguably the most hyped horse in the history of the Derby, Arazi.
Well, the whole key is Arazi, and whether or not he is a wonder horse.
He had come in here and won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile as a 2-year-old, gone back to England, and I even got sucked into the hype.
Little E.T. was a long shot.
Pat Day was his jockey.
E.T. today, Pat Day has won everything Kentucky has to offer, almost. The winningest rider in Churchill Downs history. He's never won the Derby.
I felt like I'd gone into the race with a better opportunity in years previous.
And they're off in the Kentucky Derby.
As the race unfolded, Lily T was up underneath of me in hand, just waiting for me to give him the nod to move on. And about that time, a horse called a Rossi, he went by me with Patrick Valenzuela in the saddle, and as he went by me, I thought, I'm running for second money.
Then comes Lily T. A Rossi is now charging up in the middle of the racetrack. A Rossi is flying.
A Rossi made the same move in the Derby that he did in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. But the Derby's 1.25 miles, not 1 1/16 miles.
He got about 4 or 5 lengths in front of me and then just stayed there. And so as I followed him around the turn, about the 5/16 pole, coming to the quarter pole, I seen Patrick kind of give it this move.
Now 3 of them tightly bunched as they turn for home.
He was turning him loose. He was stepping on the accelerator. He got no response. And at that point, I go, forget him, he's done.
And down the stretch they come. Lily T on the outside with Pat Day takes command.
When Lily T and I went past Casual Lives, there was a feeling that started way down deep in the pit of my stomach that just continued to grow with every jump as we neared the finish.
Lily T wins the Derby by 1.
When we crossed the finish line, I just stood up and just went to screaming, thank you, Jesus.
Praise Jesus, hallelujah. All in God's good time.
And it was at that moment after the winner's circle ceremony. Pat raised his arms into the air.
So I just raised my hands and looked to the heavens, and that was the highlight of my career. Winning the Derby. Tremendously blessed to have a statue in the Rose Garden next to Aristides, and with my hands upraised and thanking the Lord.
Coming up next, Churchill Downs track announcer Travis Stone talks about the thrill of the Kentucky Derby.
I hope everybody gets to experience what it's like when they cross the wire like that. It's the coolest feeling in the world.
Oh my God, that was so much fun, Ray.
Welcome back to the road to the Kentucky Derby, presented by Woodford Reserve.
High above the finish line is where the track announcer calls the races. Now, calling the Kentucky Derby is a bucket list assignment for any announcer, but for Travis Stone, he's actually been able to call the first leg of 2 Triple Crown winners. And I was able to catch up with him in this week's Around the Downs, brought to you by White Claw.
Ladies and gentlemen, the horses have reached the starting gate. It's post time.
And they're off in the Kentucky Derby.
Beneath the iconic Twin Spires for the first time.
As the field rounds the far turn, heading to the final furlong of the Kentucky Derby.
Travis, you're preparing to call your 5th Kentucky Derby race. What is it about that you look forward to every year?
When you're a racing fan and you have a passion for the game and you like seeing the horse races day in and day out, there's one race a year that really matters, and that's the Kentucky Derby. So to have the opportunity to call a race like the Kentucky Derby, it truly is a dream come true for someone like myself. We grew up north of Saratoga, which was the place to be in the summer, still is. I remember I'd just wander around the track, watch the races from all different vantage points. And at some point I just became obsessed with the announcing aspect of it.
Up next is today's 10th race. It is the 36th running of the Iroquois.
There's so few people that can do what you do and do it well. What are the challenges and how are you able to do what you do?
You have to have an ability to watch the race develop and unfold and have an idea of what's happening. You have to memorize the jockey's silk so you know which horse is which horse. You want to know those horses inside and out. I'll give you an example from last year. There was a lot of horses wearing the same silks, Windstar, and Justify had the silks on as well. But Bob Baffert uses a blue shadow roll which goes over the horse's nose. It was not sunny. In fact, it was absolutely miserable. But they turned for home, and I looked for that blue shadow roll to make sure that it was Justify.
Justify turns for home in front.
Without having, all the work ahead of time, who knows whether or not that's at the top of mind when they turn for home.
Justify and Mike Smith are digging down on a 2-length lead.
You have to know all the nuances of every single horse to really be able to deliver a good call.
All rise for Justify. The Kentucky Derby was never in doubt.
Do you have a favorite Kentucky Derby memory?
I had never been to the Kentucky Derby, so my first Kentucky Derby that I was going to call was the first Derby I was going to go to.
And before a record crowd of 170,000, it's time for the Kentucky Derby.
And that was absolutely wild. Walking into Churchill on Derby Day, experiencing what it's like when they come on the track, and then the race itself. it'll be hard to top what that was like.
And it's American Pharoah pulling away late. American Pharoah rules the Derby.
I hope everybody gets to experience what it's like when they cross the wire like that. It's the coolest feeling in the world.
Oh my God, that was so much fun.
When the 20 horses that make the field arrive at the paddocks and get their saddle on, they know it's almost time to run for the roses. And among these horses, there's always a favorite. But as history has shown, the favorite doesn't always win. For more on that, let's send things to our experts. Donna?
Exactly, Jordan. Who could ever forget Mind That Bird winning at 50 to 1 in 2009? Norm, are we going to see another Mind That Bird this year?
I don't know about that, Donna. But looking for under-the-radar horses, I like a horse named Tacitus. He's the Wood Memorial winner. He's flying under the radar because the Wood Memorial has not been a successful prep for the Derby recently. The horse is regally bred. He's got a Hall of Fame conditioner, and probably more importantly, he has the capability of picking up the pieces late if there's a pace meltdown.
Yeah, and he's shown that he was a fighter in the Wood Memorial. Who else do you like?
I like a horse named By My Standards. He's a Louisiana Derby winner. What I like about this horse is that anytime a horse can break his maiden, go into the deep end of the pool, and win the next race, a race like the Louisiana Derby, it shows that the horse has got a lot of upside, a lot of potential. I also like that the horse is based here at Churchill with Brett Calhoun, a locally based trainer, so he gets the benefit of running out of his stall.
And it'll give trainer Brett Calhoun his first Kentucky Derby starter. Joe, I know you're always looking to cash big on the Derby. Who are you looking at?
Watch a lot of races, watch a lot of replays, and I also pay attention to how the track is playing. And Win was up against it in the Tampa Bay Derby. It was his first try around 2 turns, ran a really good race to be 3rd behind Tacitus. Ran against the bias in the Bluegrass when he was 2nd behind Vacoma. That was a racetrack that favored speed, and he was able to close. I really like that. Ward of Will, horse I followed all winter long at the fairgrounds. He won the Lecomte, he won the Risen Star, he was the odds-on favorite in the Louisiana Derby, but his back end came out from under him shortly after the break. He was not himself that day, but he can bounce back, and if he brings his A game, he's as good as anybody. Spinoff was 2nd in the Louisiana Derby behind By My Standards. Progressive sort for Todd Pletcher. Nobody started more horses in the Derby than Todd. Maybe he'll win his 3rd with Spinoff. Certainly headed in the right direction.
And of course, War of Will, trained by your father, Mark Casse. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the great stories in this year's Kentucky Derby.
Coming up next.
All 20 horses that run in the Kentucky Derby are going to have a good story, but what are some of the great stories?
And later, a very humble Bob Baffert.
When we do, get lucky and we happen to win one of these races, and you have horses like American Pharoah or Justify, it's just, the excitement is just, that's our reward, exciting, but very nerve-wracking at the same time.
Welcome back to the Road to the Kentucky Derby, presented by Woodford Reserve.
As you can see, preparations are already underway for an unforgettable fan experience. And for everyone in thoroughbred racing, making it to the Kentucky Derby is a dream come true. And every year there are stories that stand out. Stories of perseverance, overcoming adversity, beating the odds, and yes, even exceeding expectations. For more on that, let's send things back to Donna.
Jordan, to be sure, all 20 horses that run in the Kentucky Derby are going to have a good story, but what are some of the great stories, Norm?
Well, for me personally, Donna, as a trainer and as a horseman and as a student of the game, I'm really looking forward to see if Richard Mandela, the trainer of Omaha Beach, or Bill Mott, trainer of Tacitus and Country House, can win their first Kentucky Derby. These are stand-up guys. These are guys that are in the Hall of Fame that have done virtually everything you can do in the game. And I don't care what they say publicly. Behind closed doors, they want to win this race. They want to win it bad. It's the most important thing you can do as a horseman. And I'm really looking forward to see if one of these 2 guys can pull it off on first Saturday in May.
Joe, it just goes to show how hard it is to win this race when neither one of these guys have won the Kentucky Derby.
And Hall of Famer Steve Asmussen, 0 for 19, to tack on to what Norm said. It's so hard to win it. He is the trainer that started the most horses without getting it done, but that's only one of the storylines with Long Range Toddy. The cooler one is probably John Court, 58-year-old rider. He's going to become the oldest jockey to ride in the Kentucky Derby. Bobby Bear did it when he was 57, and Bill Shoemaker won it when he was 54 with Ferdinand. Seeing John Court in the starting gate for the Kentucky Derby, that's going to be really cool.
George Weaver, born and raised here in Louisville, Kentucky, just like me. I know what he must be going through. There's got to be a lot of pride, a lot of excitement. He has a horse named Vacoma that won the Bluegrass. He's got a legitimate shot to make some noise in the Derby, possibly win the Derby. When you grow up here in Louisville, The Derby's everything, and I just can't imagine what George Weaver's thinking right now.
Well, we've been doing a lot of talking about winning, and one horse who hasn't won a race yet is Bodie Express, but he's earned enough points to get in the Kentucky Derby. He was second behind Maximum Security in the Florida Derby. Only 11 maidens have run in the Derby in the history of the race. 3 of them have won, including Triple Crown winner Sir Barton Donna, so anything can happen in the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, Sir Barton in 1919, but you've got to go all the way back to Broker's Tip in 1933 for the last maiden to win the Kentucky Derby, but we know it's the Kentucky Derby. There's going to be great stories.
On the first Saturday in May, these stands will come alive, filled with gorgeous hats, ecstatic fans, and of course, mint juleps. Trust me, there's nowhere else you'd rather be in the entire world than right here watching the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. So let's take a look at some of the sights and sounds of the Kentucky Derby in this week's Horse Tracks.
Win and lose, we always had each other's backs. So why give anything to just go back to flipping through those burnt CDs with the Memorex full of memories where we rolled around with the windows down and ran Spruce Creek. This one's for the home team, raise one up for the ones that raised me. When things got tough, we toughened up. Home team. This one's for the
They're off in the Kentucky Derby.
home team. Let's hear it for the home team. Raise one up for the ones that raised me. When things got tough, we toughened up. Home team. Yeah, my home team. Yeah, my home team.
Justify has won the Kentucky Derby.
Home team.
Coming up next.
The Derby is a driving force in Bob's life. So he starts thinking about the Derby pretty early on in a horse's career.
Welcome back to the road to the Kentucky Derby, presented by Woodford Reserve.
This is the winner's circle here at Churchill Downs, and someone who's been here 5 times for the Kentucky Derby, legendary trainer Bob Baffert. And in the past 4 years, he's had 2 Triple Crown winners. It seems like every year he has a favorite, and this year is no exception. We spent some time with him at his home in this week's Behind the Scenes.
Coming to the finish, American Pharaoh and Victor Espinosa have won the Kentucky Derby.
Well, it said that you're perhaps a more thoughtful Bob Baffert and that you've slowed down a bit to enjoy the smaller moments like you had today with your 10-year-old son, Bodie. What was that like?
It felt so good to be together. Bodie, he knows what we go through. And Jill, she's the one that takes the brunt. She has to shoulder my emotions. It's a fantasy moment for us. It's unbelievable that I'm standing here. I can't believe how blessed and lucky my life has been.
Most people's year starts January 1st. Our year kind of starts the first Saturday in May. It's important to him and it's important to us. So it's a pretty big deal around here.
It's a team effort. I mean, we have to give up a lot. We all feel the same when that horse is going to the gate, the tension, the nervousness. That's why when we do, get lucky and we happen to win one of these races and you have horses like American Pharaoh or Justify, it's just, the excitement is just, that's our reward. I still don't take it for granted. It's so exciting, but very nerve-wracking at the same time.
Into the gate with a chance at the Triple Crown. The 147th Belmont Stakes over 1.5 miles.
When I think about him, I get emotional because I remember back to that day, and by the time he went in the gate, like my stomach was just in knots.
She just loves the sport. She's really attached to the horses. And so when they win, it's like you're watching your own children perform, and so you're so proud of them.
I wanted to go back and see the horse and just give him a hug and tell him how much, we loved him.
American Pharaoh is finally the one! American Pharaoh has won the Triple Crown!
Once we won the Triple Crown, we knew it could be done. Going into the Belmont with Justify, we knew we had the horse, we knew he was doing well. It was a different feeling.
Is this really happening again? It was almost unbelievable that he was in that position again and that we had this monster of a horse in the barn.
He's just perfect, and now he's just immortal!
The Derby is a driving force in Bob's life.
The road to the Kentucky Derby is probably the most exciting part of the race.
Game winner. He's a habitual winner. He's the undefeated winner of the American Pharaoh.
I'll tell you what game winner reminds me of. He's a silver charm. I remember that in the Breeders' Cup, horse came out and bumped him. He still kept running. He's not going to be intimidated by another horse. And that's one thing horses like Justify and American Pharaoh had.
He doesn't take anything for granted. I don't take anything for granted because there have been years when, you know, we didn't make it to the Derby.
To me, the bar is the Kentucky Derby. It keeps me motivated. It keeps me going. You've got to be a little crazy to be in this business, but I enjoy every bit of it.
What a great piece, and we certainly wish Bob the best of luck. And someone who would love to see Bob's horses, John Asher, who passed away suddenly at age 62 last year. He was a monumental figure at Churchill Downs, in Louisville, and in the entire sport of horse racing. Not since Colonel Matt Winn has there been a figure so associated as the face of Churchill Downs and the Kentucky Derby. As we say goodbye, we leave you with these memories.
Where's Wayne Perky coming in?
Wayne Perky's in this pocket.
Over here. Where's the producer coming in for you?
The producer is in this pocket with this earpiece.
And what is this right here?
The most important, this is my wife.
Kentucky Derby is a combination of a lot of things that lead up to something magical on the first Saturday in May.
Now.
There it is. We are going to be down here in the plaza.
My thanks to the horsemen and horsewomen and the horses who have made it such a fantastic sport to cover. Really a labor of love. And over the years, racing has given me a lot of joy and tremendous amount of thrill. And I hope this means that I put something back into it because it's given a lot to me. Thank you very much, and it's a thrill of a life. Thank you.